After I paid for my son's honeymoon, he called me from the airport and told me, "Mom, you're not invited." At first, I thought I misheard him. But no, his voice was cold, certain, and final. Weeks later, he showed up at my doorstep with his lawyer, holding a stack of documents he wanted me to sign. I did not argue. I did not cry. I simply smiled, opened my purse, and said, "Sure, but first, someone wants to say something." My name is Evelyn Ross. I'm 52 years old, a widow, and a nurse who has spent most of her life working long shifts and raising my only son, Daniel. My husband passed away when Daniel was just 9, and from that day on, everything in my life revolved around making sure my boy had a future. I gave up vacations, new clothes, and even nights of sleep just to make ends meet. Daniel was my pride, my joy, and my purpose. When he was young, we were inseparable. He would run into my arms after school, telling me about his day, and I would listen as if each word was treasure. I never complained about the hard days at the hospital because his smile made every struggle worth it. But life has a way of changing when you least expect it. Daniel grew older, and when he met Samantha, I saw how quickly his world shifted. At first, I was excited. I told myself I was gaining a daughter, someone to bring more love into our small family. I welcomed her with open arms, cooking dinners, inviting her to family gatherings, and treating her as my own. Yet, behind her polite smile, I always felt a wall. Samantha was polite, yes, but never warm. She didn't like it when Daniel spent too much time with me. She would cut me off in conversations, making it clear who had his ear now. I brushed it aside, telling myself it was just the adjustment of a new relationship. Still, the distance grew. Phone calls became shorter. Visits became rare. My son, the boy who once held my hand through the hardest nights, now seemed too busy, too distracted, and too different. It broke my heart, but I swallowed the pain, because that's what mothers do. When Daniel told me they were getting married, I was overjoyed. I wanted their day to be perfect. Even though money was tight, I worked extra shifts at the hospital and dipped into the small savings I had left. I surprised them with the gift of a honeymoon, paying for their flights and hotel. It was the most I could give, and I gave it with love, even if it meant I would go without for months. In those moments, I told myself this was my role as a mother, to give, to sacrifice, to support. I never imagined that gift would be the very thing to open my eyes to how far my son had slipped away from me. The morning of their honeymoon started like any other. I remember standing in my small kitchen, pouring myself a cup of coffee, feeling proud that my son was beginning his new life, proud that I had helped make it possible, and hopeful that this marriage would give him the happiness I had always wanted for him. I imagined him and Samantha walking through the airport, hand in hand, about to board a plane to a beautiful beach I could never afford to see myself. It gave me comfort to know he would enjoy what I never could. Then my phone rang. It was Daniel. My heart lit up when I saw his name. I thought he was calling to thank me one more time before the flight. I answered cheerfully, "Hi, sweetheart. Are you at the gate already?" But his voice was not cheerful. It was heavy, guarded, almost cold. He said, "Mom, I need you to understand something. You're not invited." For a second, I thought he was joking. I laughed nervously and said, "Daniel, what do you mean?" Of course, I wasn't planning on tagging along. "This is your honeymoon." He sighed, and then the words that followed cut me deeper than any wound I had ever known. "Samantha and I talked. We don't think it's good for you to be too involved. We need space. So, from now on, we'd like you to take a step back. Please respect that." My hand shook so hard I almost dropped the phone. My throat tightened as if I had swallowed stones. This wasn't about the honeymoon. It was about me. My son was pushing me out of his life. The boy I had raised alone. The boy I had worked double shifts for. The boy I had prayed over every night was telling me that my place in his life was no longer welcome. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask him how he could say that after everything I had done for him, but the words never came. Instead, I stayed quiet. My silence felt like the only way to preserve whatever fragile connection I still had left. With my voice shaking, I said, "All right, Daniel, I understand." Then I hung up before he could hear me cry. That night, I sat alone in my living room, staring at the old family photos on the wall. One picture showed Daniel at 10 years old, holding a fishing rod next to his father. His smile was wide, his eyes bright. I whispered to myself, where did that boy go? And when did I lose him? I told no one about the call. Not my friends at work, not my neighbors, not even my brother Michael. I carried the pain in silence because I didn't want anyone to see how broken I felt. I wanted to believe that maybe, once the honeymoon was over, things would return to normal. But weeks later, a knock came at my door. When I opened it, my son stood there, looking different, distant, sharp, and impatient. Beside him was Samantha, her expression unreadable, her arms crossed tightly against her chest. And behind them, a man in a dark suit holding a briefcase, their lawyer. "Mom, we need to talk," Daniel said flatly. I stepped aside, letting them in, my stomach twisting with unease. We sat at the dining table, the same table where I had once served Daniel his birthday cakes, where we had celebrated Christmases and Thanksgivings together. Now, it felt like a courtroom. The lawyer opened his briefcase and pulled out several documents. He slid them across the table toward me. "Mrs. Ross, we need your signature here," he said, tapping the papers with a pen. I glanced down and froze. The documents were about the house. My house, the one my late husband and I had bought together, the one I had worked tirelessly to keep after his death. The lawyer explained that transferring ownership to Daniel and Samantha would ensure stability for the young couple's future. My heart sank. They wanted me to sign over the only thing I had left of my husband, the only security I had for myself. Samantha leaned forward, her voice calm but cold. "Evelyn, this is just paperwork. Daniel and I will take care of you later, but we need this now." I looked at my son, searching his face for hesitation, for guilt, for anything that reminded me of the boy I had raised. But his eyes were fixed on the documents. He wouldn't even meet mine. In that moment, the pain of the airport call returned, sharper than ever. It wasn't just about being left behind anymore. It was about being erased. Piece by piece, they were stripping away not only my role as a mother, but my dignity, my security, my very place in the family I had built. My hands trembled as I held the pen, but inside me, something shifted. The tears I had swallowed weeks ago turned into a quiet strength. They expected me to be weak, to be desperate, to give in without a fight. But I was not the woman they thought I was. I set the pen down gently and forced a smile. "Of course," I said softly. "I'll sign. But before I do, someone wants to say something." And with that, the stage was set for the moment I had been preparing for. I sat at that dining table with the pen in my hand, staring at the paper. The room felt smaller, the air heavy. Across from me, Samantha's eyes stayed fixed on me, sharp and unyielding, as though she were daring me to resist. Daniel sat beside her, his jaw tight, his gaze locked on the documents instead of me. I wanted so badly for him to look at me, to give me one sign that this wasn't his idea, that maybe he was being pressured. But the longer I watched, the clearer it became. He was not only part of this, he was leading it. For years, I had been the mother who gave, without question. I worked shifts that broke my body, cooked meals on tired legs, and tucked Daniel into bed, even when my eyes could barely stay open. I gave him everything I had, and yet here he was, ready to take the one thing left that tied me to his father and to the life we had built. I pressed the pen against the paper, just enough for the ink to touch the page, and then stopped. My mind raced, but my face stayed calm. I couldn't let them see what I was thinking. I couldn't let them know I had already prepared for this moment. Weeks before, after Daniel's call from the airport, I had gone to my brother, Michael. He's 3 years younger than me, with the kind of steady presence that makes you feel safe just by being around him. He had always been the one I turned to when life felt too heavy. I told him everything, the honeymoon, the way Daniel had spoken to me, the fear gnawing at me that something worse was coming. Michael listened without interruption, and when I finished, he leaned forward and said firmly, "Evelyn, if they try to pull anything with the house, don't face it alone. Let me handle it." He was a lawyer, not just by profession, but by heart. He cared about truth, about fairness, and above all, about protecting the people he loved. For the first time in weeks, I had felt a flicker of relief. We began preparing quietly. He pulled the property deeds, checked the legal protections, and explained every step to me in plain words. They can pressure you, but they can't take what isn't theirs, he told me. The law is on your side. That memory filled my chest with warmth as I sat at the table now, staring at the expectant faces before me. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't cornered. I wasn't going to sign away my home because they demanded it. I let the silence stretch for a moment, then set the pen down gently. I looked at Daniel, forcing a calm smile onto my face. Of course, I said softly. I'll sign. But before I do, someone wants to say something. Daniel finally looked up at me, confusion flashing across his face. Samantha frowned, her lips tightening. The lawyer shifted uneasily in his chair, sensing something was about to happen. I stood, smoothed my hands over my skirt to steady them, and walked toward the hallway. My purse sat on the side table by the door. Inside it, I had tucked away the final piece of my preparation, not just the property deed, but the confidence that came from knowing I wasn't walking into this blind. I called out, "Michael, would you come in now?" The sound of footsteps echoed from the front hall. My brother appeared, holding a folder of papers, his expression calm but firm. For a moment, the entire room froze. Daniel's eyes widened, and Samantha's face hardened, her control beginning to crack. Michael stepped into the dining room, placed the folder neatly on the table, and looked directly at Daniel. "Before your mother signs anything, you and your wife need to understand exactly what these documents mean." The lawyer blinked, clearly caught off guard. "And you are?" Michael's voice didn't waver. "I'm her brother, and her attorney, which means if you're here to pressure Evelyn into giving up her legal rights, you're going to have to go through me first." My chest swelled with a mixture of relief and pride. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel alone. I had someone standing beside me, someone who believed in protecting me, not exploiting me. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, his voice finally breaking the silence. "Mom, you didn't have to bring him into this. We're just trying to make sure everything is fair." Michael leaned forward, his tone sharp. "Fair? Fair would have been treating your mother with the respect she deserves. Fair would have been remembering who raised you and who paid for everything you've enjoyed. This," he tapped the papers on the table, "isn't fairness. It's coercion, and I won't let it happen." The weight of his words filled the room. Samantha's glare flickered, her confidence wavering as the power dynamic shifted. Daniel opened his mouth to respond, but closed it again, his shoulders slumping slightly. I sat back down, my hands steady now, and looked at my son. My heart ached for the boy I once knew, but my voice came out clear and strong. "I gave you my love, my work, my sacrifices. But this house? This isn't just a building. It's the last piece of your father, and it's my home. You won't take it from me." For the first time, Daniel looked unsure, and for the first time, I felt in control. The room felt charged, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. Michael's words cut through the tension like a blade, sharp and undeniable. Samantha's confidence faltered for the first time since stepping into my home. Daniel looked like a boy again, not the proud, stubborn man he had been moments before, but a child caught in something far bigger than he understood. I sat quietly, my hands folded in my lap, letting the silence weigh on them. Michael slid the folder across the table, his voice steady and professional. "Evelyn owns this home outright. Her name is on the deed, and it is protected by law. Any attempt to transfer ownership without her clear and voluntary consent would not only be invalid, it could also be considered fraud. If you were aware of that fact, then bringing a lawyer here to pressure her could be interpreted as coercion, and coercion has legal consequences." The lawyer, who had walked in with such an air of authority, shifted uncomfortably. His jaw tightened as he skimmed through the documents Michael had placed before him. I could see the hesitation in his eyes. He hadn't expected resistance, certainly not from someone who knew the law better than he did. Samantha leaned forward, her voice clipped but defiant. "This is unnecessary. We were just trying to make arrangements for the future. Daniel is her son, after all. Isn't it normal for families to share what they have?" Michael didn't flinch. "Families share love and respect, not manipulation, and not underhanded demands dressed up as arrangements." Her cheeks flushed red, but she stayed silent. The lawyer cleared his throat and muttered something about needing to reassess the documents, but Michael cut him off. "No, you don't need to reassess. You need to leave, unless you'd like me to report this entire meeting for attempted exploitation of a vulnerable adult." I looked at Samantha then, really looked at her, the smooth, polished mask she had worn so carefully. Since the day I met her was cracking. There was anger there, yes, but also fear. Her plan was falling apart. She had underestimated me, assuming I would be the meek, tired mother who signed anything for the sake of peace. She hadn't counted on me having the strength to say no, or the courage to bring someone who could stand up for me when I couldn't stand alone. Daniel's voice broke the silence at last. "Mom, you don't understand. We just wanted—" I interrupted him gently, my words soft but firm. "No, Daniel, I understand perfectly. You wanted the house. You wanted the security your father and I built with years of sacrifice. But you didn't want me. You wanted what I could give you, not who I am." His eyes flickered with guilt, but he said nothing. I pressed on, my voice growing stronger. "Do you remember when you were 12 and you got sick with pneumonia? I slept on the hospital chair for 3 nights, holding your hand, praying you would breathe easier. Do you remember when I worked through Christmas so you could have the bicycle you wanted? Or when I spent my only savings sending you to college so you could have a chance at a life your father and I never had?" My throat tightened, but I didn't stop. "I did all of that because I love you, because you were my son, my reason for everything. And today, you came into my home not as that boy I raised, but as someone I barely recognize. And that," I pointed at the papers still sitting on the table, "that is not love. That is betrayal." Daniel's shoulders sagged. For a moment, I saw something in his eyes, a flicker of shame, maybe even regret, but it was drowned quickly by Samantha's sharp glare. She reached for his arm, pulling him back to her side. Michael pushed his chair back and stood, his presence towering over the table. "This conversation is over. Evelyn will not be signing anything, and if you attempt to bring this matter up again, you'll find yourself facing a courtroom instead of this dining room." The lawyer looked between Michael and me, then quietly packed his briefcase. "I'll advise my clients to reconsider," he muttered, before heading toward the door. Samantha rose quickly, her voice tight with frustration. "Daniel, let's go." She tugged at his arm, but he hesitated, staring at me. For a brief second, it was just the two of us, the mother who had given everything, and the son who had taken it for granted. I wanted him to stay. I wanted him to fight against her influence, to prove that somewhere deep inside, he was still the boy I loved. But he said nothing. He let her lead him out the door. The sound of it closing echoed through the house, heavy and final. I sat in silence, staring at the empty chairs across from me. My hands trembled, not from fear this time, but from release. I had stood my ground. I had faced the people who tried to take everything from me, and I had not broken. Michael rested a hand on my shoulder. "You did well, Evelyn. You are stronger than you know." I nodded, my chest aching with a mix of sorrow and pride. "I just never thought it would come to this. I never thought I'd need to protect myself from my own son." He squeezed my shoulder gently. "Love makes us blind sometimes, but today you saw clearly." Tears welled in my eyes, but they weren't the tears of defeat. They were tears of survival, of strength reclaimed. I had lost something that day, an illusion of the son I thought I still had, but I had gained something far more important. The reminder that my dignity, my security, and my worth were not his to take. The battle was over, and for the first time in years, I felt like I had won. When the door closed behind Daniel and Samantha, the silence in my house felt deafening. For years, my home had been a place filled with laughter, arguments, late-night talks, and memories of a family that once felt whole. Now, in that moment, it felt hollow. I sat at the dining table, staring at the papers they had left behind, the inkless signatures that had almost been forced onto me. My hands shook slightly, not from fear anymore, but from the weight of everything I had just lived through. Michael sat across from me, watching quietly, giving me the space to process. He knew better than anyone that the battle I had just fought was not only legal, but deeply personal. "Evelyn," he said softly, "what you did today was more than protecting your home. You protected yourself. That matters." I nodded, but my heart was heavy. I thought about the boy I raised, the son who once clung to my hand at the grocery store, who used to call me in the middle of the night when he had bad dreams. That boy was gone, replaced by a man who had allowed greed and influence to twist his sense of loyalty. The hardest truth to face wasn't Samantha's manipulation or the lawyer's tactics. It was that Daniel had chosen to stand against me instead of beside me. That night, I walked through the house slowly, running my fingers along the photographs on the walls. There was Daniel's graduation picture, his wide smile full of hope and pride. There was the old family portrait, me holding him tightly, while my late husband stood tall beside us. Each frame was a reminder of a journey I had poured my soul into, but it also reminded me of how easily love can be taken for granted, and how blind I had been in giving without limits. For days afterward, the house remained quiet. No calls came from Daniel, no messages asking how I was. Samantha, of course, stayed silent. I went to work as usual, cared for my patients, smiled when I needed to, but inside, I was carrying a storm. I replayed the moments at the table over and over. His refusal to meet my eyes, his willingness to sign away my life for his comfort. Each time, it hurt like a fresh wound. But slowly, something shifted. The pain began to turn into clarity. I realized that what happened was not a sign of my failure as a mother, but a lesson in boundaries. I had believed that love meant giving endlessly, even when it drained me. I thought motherhood required sacrifice without question, but that day taught me that love without respect is just exploitation, and sacrifice without limits leaves you empty. One evening, Michael came by with takeout. We sat at the kitchen counter, eating in comfortable silence until he said, "You know, Evelyn, you don't need to carry this guilt. You gave him everything. It's not your fault he couldn't see it." His words sank deep. I had been blaming myself, wondering if I had been too strict, too soft, too giving, too protective. But the truth was, I had done my best. And sometimes, a parent's best still isn't enough to stop a child from choosing a different path. Weeks passed, and I began to feel lighter. I poured my energy back into myself, my work, my friends, even the garden I had neglected for years. Each small step reminded me that I was more than a mother defined by her son. I was a woman with her own life, her own worth, and her own dignity. Then, one late afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with shades of gold, there was a knock on my door. I froze for a moment, my heart racing. When I opened it, Daniel stood there, alone. He looked different, tired, uncertain, without Samantha by his side. We stood in silence for a long moment. His eyes met mine this time, and in them I saw something I hadn't seen in years: vulnerability. He cleared his throat and said quietly, "Mom, can we talk?" I didn't know what he would say. I didn't know if he was here to apologize, to explain, or simply to ask for something else. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the answer. I wasn't desperate for his approval or his presence. I was ready to listen, but only if it came with respect. I stepped aside, letting him in, but my heart was steady, because now I knew the truth. My value wasn't tied to how much I gave or how much he took. My value came from standing firm in who I was. As he walked into the living room, I whispered to myself, "This time, I'll hear him, but I won't lose myself again." And that was the real lesson, the one I wished I had learned years ago. Love is powerful, but it must never come at the cost of your dignity. Being a mother means giving, yes, but it also means knowing when to protect yourself, even from your own child. That day at the table, I thought I had lost everything, but in truth, I had gained something far greater. I had found my voice. I had found my strength, and no one, son, daughter-in-law, or lawyer, could ever take that from me again.